everyone. My name is Ryan Eckhart, and welcome to Calling All Men, a show destigmatizing men's mental health. Previously, we have identified some of the different aspects of men's mental health, including the man box, toxic masculinity, and dismantling the like. So now what? Joining me again is Dr. Matt Januki and Jeff Matsushita. Today, we are talking about the different ways to help not only yourself, but others too. Thank you both for being here today.
You're welcome.
Dr. Januki, you've studied men's mental health. What would you say to men who have a hard time talking about what they are feeling?
Well, I think I could certainly say that I understand their reasons that they have a hard time, or I can understand why many men have a hard time talking about their feelings. That for many men, that's been a way that they've protected themselves. Maybe they have talked about their feelings, or maybe they've seen other men talked about their feelings and they've seen those men maybe get shamed or made fun of or humiliated even. And so I guess I can understand why they do that or why that might be protective for them. I guess on the other hand, I would also say that if they do struggle with that I would really encourage them to consider what might be the implications of not being able to talk about your feelings or not talking about your feelings. It does limit your ability to connect with other people. It limits your ability to build relationships, really connect intimately with other people. And so for those men really to consider, is that how they want their life to be? Would they like to connect more deeply? And if so, that can be a really important way to do it.
Jeff, same question for you. What would you say to men who struggle with talking about their feelings?
I'd say thank you. If they told me they struggle talking about their feelings, it lets me know that I'm not alone. Dr. Janucci, you gave me a sense of validating my feelings and stories before camera started rolling. And I think that normalization piece is certainly valuable for me to be able to move forward. Oftentimes in this idea of how I've believed to be a man was to be independent, never ask for help, and always seem to be confident. While faking in that mask all the time, it doesn't allow me to kind of get the read that other people are struggling too. So for me, one example I've done since COVID has happened, a mentor of mine has challenged me to shift my language. So when I visit and I see people, rather than say, hey, you good? Hey, what's going on with you? And then not giving them a beat to respond, I've tried to flip my language and say, how are you doing? With the depth of its sincerity that I truly mean it. And in my feelings, my responsibility, because I love and trust these individuals, is if I'm asking a question, then I want to be ready and willing to listen to it and see where we go with it. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think language is a huge thing when talking about mental health, especially with men. I know you've studied that a little bit, like how talking with men about certain different aspects of what they like. So like you talk about Star Wars, and I think that's always something that has helped me be able to talk about what I'm feeling and be able to open up to other people about it.
Absolutely.
Jeff, you're a leader at the Idaho Coalition for a Call to Men. What got you involved in that, and how can our viewers get involved in that?
The work found me, and I'm very thankful it did. Again, I shared of this idea of the way I was expected to be as a man. At a Call to Men, they often talk about the man box, this very narrow, limited definition of tough, strong, never ask for help, stoic, except for displays of anger. And so my work has helped me reconnect my head to my heart. And so I think for all of us as men is that the idea about being fully human and getting back to humanity. I know I've learned a lot from my female partner. We've been together for almost 23 years. But I've learned about humanness from not only listening to women, but also getting permissions from women. So it's not my work is about ending domestic and sexual violence, or if we want to flip it, really men's violence. And I think there's access to this closeness of humanity is, for me, is the women I love, which is my wife, my mother, women I work with. So for me, the ability to listen and just observe. So that idea that I can have expressions that go beyond just anger and domination, but instead ask questions of curiosity and really kind of look through the world of newness, I hope to. about expressing what I'm feeling, and knowing the benefit that if I am healthier, the outcome is that my family nuclear, our kids and my partner will feel safe, will feel healthy, and as that expands out, just knowing that we can end gender-based violence and a lot of forms of oppression, really, if men are willing to be happy.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important topic, and we thank you for your work at the Idaho Coalition, because it's something that it's hard to talk about with certain people, and I thank you for your work there.
Well, I want to give credit, it's not mine. I learned about it through really people who've experienced the violence firsthand. So predominantly a lot of women and a lot of women of color have been willing to share with me not only the sexism they've experienced, but also the racism, and also help me examine the ways that I've been a part of the problem as well. So Men Stopping Violence is one of my early mentors in this work, and their first value is we are the work. And so rather than be outward focused about ways other men can be doing and shifting, for me, a lot of the work still continues to be how am I contributing to it, and what ways am I willing to make changes?
So this question is for the both of you. What would you say to those who struggle with mental health, and what would you say to those that know people that struggle?
People that struggle with mental health related concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, just a couple things. I mean, I think certainly what I teach in my class and have experienced personally too, that on one hand, it feels like maybe you're strange or unusual or different, but when we actually look at the data, that it's actually not that unusual for people to experience mental health related struggles or concerns or problems. And so you might feel alone, but you're actually not that alone. You're not that unusual. So I think that's one of the problems around the class that I teach in abnormal psychology. It's like almost we should frame it as like normal psychology, that having a problem at some point in time in your life is not that unusual, or not that atypical. So that's probably one thing. And then probably something else is that it's really hard to ask for help. Hard to reach out for help. I think probably most people have been either stigmatized, or they've seen somebody be stigmatized, or they've seen something on television or in a movie where they've seen somebody be stigmatized because of they asked for help or the symptoms they've experienced, and so they're hesitant about that. And so on that, I can understand their hesitancy and their difficulty seeking out for help. At the same time, reaching out for help can be so important and so powerful and beneficial. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the life of people that I care about. I've seen it in the lives of my students. My students many of my students have an exercise where they seek out help for extra credit, and a lot of them are hesitant, and then in the end they say, wow, this was pretty good, I really liked this. I've seen it in the lives of my clients, and so it can be really powerful and helpful and beneficial, so to encourage them to do that even though it's hard.
Yeah, I remember freshman year, I know we talked about this, like I didn't think I wanted to go to therapy, and then something really impacted my life, and I was just like, wow, I need to go to therapy because this is something I'm really struggling with and I need help. And I think that was a good first step, is like to recognize that I needed help and I couldn't battle this.
Yeah.
I couldn't fight this battle by myself, and I think that's like a good first step to take.
Absolutely. A big, but such an important first step, that recognition and then the ability to step out and take that risk is really huge and really big.
To build on what you said, Dr. Danucci, about, to me, I hear you can't see it, you can't be it. Ryan, you were sharing about your own quandary back and forth. One of the things my father did for me is change the trajectory. This was in the late 80s. He sought out somebody to talk to because he knew what he shared was his behavior was going to lead to a point where he was eventually going to harm either myself or my mother physically. So he reached out to the Montana Coalition Against Domestic Violence and found somebody to talk to in our area. So growing up early, it was almost normalized that in the late 80s that my father was seeking help to talk to somebody. And at the time, it was called anger management, which I would listen to the tapes that he would get, but that changed my trajectory. So to me, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Yeah. And I think there's part of the stigmatization that I heard you say of, if we don't normalize this idea, that we all require help. And I've been a basketball coach for a number of years, and I came up in a locker room. As a coach, I was more than willing to ask for help to how to approach the 1-2-2 defense that we were going to face the next night. I'd research, I'd talk, I'd ask. But for me, when I'd see maybe my players or women in my life display emotions like tears, I'd freeze and not really have any way to deal with that. So to me, that gives me hope and faith that, looking back the way that I was raised as a man, to believe that displaying emotions was not correct, we can relearn those muscles. I think it's a reconnecting our heads to our hearts. So there are areas that I am more than willing to ask for help. And I think it's just about expanding those and having somebody who I know, I trust and love, that has taken that step and is sharing with me their process through mental health, that allows me the permission to kind of seek my own if in the times that I do need it, which currently I am.
Yeah, no, ever since COVID started, I was taking mental health days every Friday, so like no social media, nothing, just so I wasn't on my phone always like paranoid or like, oh my gosh, why hasn't this person texted me back? And I feel like those mental health days help me so much. And like I just take time to myself, like I go out, I go to Chipotle just because it's like my comfort food, and I just kind of like treat myself. And like I look forward to those days every week now. Like at the start I was like, oh my gosh, it's Friday again, that means no social media. But like now I'm just like, I'm so excited to get to Friday because I could finally take time to myself, because like during the week it's all about like work, school, trying to get other people plans, and I feel like it's helped me so much, and I recommend doing that for everyone, like taking mental health days, because it's helped me so much, and I'm so glad that I've started doing that.
Yeah, good for you for taking those steps to take care of yourself, especially in such a difficult, stressful time. I mean, I think we've heard so much about the stress that people are overall experiencing, and then of course the stress that particular groups of people are experiencing, right? The compounded stress. You were talking about people that women of color in particular that are experiencing or have experienced so much stress, and then of course over the pandemic as well have just taken on so much, and so you've talked about your ability to recognize this is a really hard time, and you've taken some space. You've been able to kind of work with that and adjust to the stress. Yeah. Good for you. I'm glad that you've been able to do that.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Ryan. There's another piece to it about recognizing what the signs are.
Yeah.
The word depression was something that I would always run from, and I always envisioned it to be as deep, deep sadness, without realizing that, no, my feelings of being angry, my feelings of not feeling worthy enough, and the way the permissions I was given were to express anger. But knowing that those were signs of my symptoms of being in a depressive state or moving towards depression, maybe not in a clinical diagnosis, but that I cycle through my emotions of highs, lows. So for me, being able to just also recognize what the signs and symptoms would be. So again, being in conversation with other men, seeking help from professionals, but the Google has been nothing but a wonderful source. I keep trying to look for the .orgs, not the .coms, just to make sure, because I've gone down that web before. But reiterate, the signs and symptoms were very helpful for me to hear and see, and then be able to reflect on how I am, where I'm at in those symptoms.
Is it okay if I follow up on one thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really like one thing that I've heard you say consistently, Jeff, as you talked about, seems like a really important part of what you do, and a principle in your life is you're connected with other men, and you support other men support you, and it sounds like that's something that's pretty important, and I've really noticed that.
Thank you, and it is. I used to believe that myth that I had to do it by myself. I believed in the Disney of the knight and the warrior that sling the sword and never reflect on what it was, but it was a gift I got from one of my uncles who served in the Japanese battalion, the 442nd, and he talked about the boat ride home and the time that they were able to cry, to hold one another, and to bond. And then the sadness part was that he let it go. But they would get together every 2 years, those men from that battalion. And I think there's something in that brotherhood of what they experienced. So for me, again, I got permission from my uncle to know that seeking help and community with other men who've gone through experiences was a way that he heals. So,
Yeah.
yes, it certainly during this past year, I have been very connected to other men.
Absolutely.
And Ryan was brave enough to reach out, and we started a conversation. And so now there's been a group of men throughout almost a year now, who've been meeting every Thursday on Zoom for that same kind of connection to hold one another up. So.
Yeah, I just noticed that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I found that community circle that we go to very helpful, because it's good to know that there's other men out there from all walks of life that struggle with the same things that I do. Obviously, like, it's a little bit different, like, with every person, but like, it's good to know, like, I could be able to open up and talk about, like, these issues, and it brings me a sense of, like, comfort, because, like, I'm not alone. Like, there's other people, and I just love that aspect of it.
What's the old magic? And I know women in my life do this all the time.
All the time. Yep.
And so where is that difference of why we as men try to ride this out,
Yeah.
solo? So again, I've learned from women.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like we talked about with, like, the toxic masculinity, like it was mainly just like a woman's study, like like toxic masculinity was like a woman's, like, study, and like what changed, and I feel like we could learn a lot from, like, women and, like, what they've learned from about mental health and stuff, and I think it'd be very beneficial too.
Yeah. I really appreciate you inviting us on, but have this conversation again. If you can't see it, you can't be it. So I think this is all about those permission stakes that we as men need to see. I'll speak for myself. I need to see other people before I believe I can be it. Esther Stoller is the executive director of Futures Without Violence, and she has said a simple statement: men are permission seekers, period. To me, that really resonates, that as the more we do, we normalize these kind of conversations, how we can be and sharing, as you shared with Ryan about the knowing you're not alone. I think there are a lot of us out who are looking for more.
Well, couldn't have said it any better than that. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Jeff and Matt, and everyone involved in making this show a reality. Take care.